Hello, filmmakers. Welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast. This is episode 10, and today we're talking with Ashley Scott Meyers of sellingyourscreenplay.com. So, let's go!
Welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast, where it's all about learning how to make and market your independent film online. And now your host, Jason Buff.
Hello, and welcome to the IndieFilmAcademy.com podcast. Wait, I think I said that wrong. Okay. Welcome to the Indie Film Academy podcast. I am your host, your excellent host, Jason Buff. I just watched the Saturday Night Live 40-year reunion, so it was that's in my brain right now. And today we are going to be talking with Ashley Scott Meyers of sellingyourscreenplay.com. Ashley's going to talk a lot about what you can do to, make a living or at least make some income as a screenwriter and the process of getting it out to producers and, a lot of good tips and things to make sure you're writing screenplays that actually sell and that will attract producers. So we'll get to that in just a second. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at indiefilmacademy.com. And also, if you enjoy this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review if you have time. I know you're busy. It's rough out there, folks. I'm with you. Okay, here we go.
Let's even go back further. You want to really get into the minutia. One of the things that I think a lot of people miss, and it's not just in screenwriting, it's in any walk of life or any business, any entrepreneurial pursuit. And screenwriting is definitely an entrepreneurial pursuit. I mean, you have to be self-motivated. You're creating a product. Your product is your screenplay. The marketing of that product begins way before, in my opinion, if you're smart, it begins way before you even write your screenplay. So if you finish your screenplay and then you say, okay, now I want to go and try and sell this screenplay, you've already made some critical errors. You haven't thought through your marketing plan before you started writing your script. And I think that's crucial. And just to make some parallels, I can pretty much guarantee you that when Apple was coming up with this idea for an iPhone, they didn't go and build a prototype iPhone. They didn't build that iPhone and then say, hey, look at this cool gadget. I wonder how we can market it. I can almost guarantee you one of the first conversations Steve Jobs had was with AT&T and with Verizon. And they said, if we can create this thing, which we're pretty sure we can create, how are we going to sell it? How are we going to market it? What's that going to look like? And so they knew before they built, probably even before they started, even on the initial plans, the initial schematics of building an iPhone, they already probably knew that AT&T was going to take them on as a carrier. They were going to be able to bundle this as an AT&T product. So I think that's crucial, especially for new screenwriters, is to understand what you're trying to do before you start writing your script. If you write your script and then decide, well, now how am I going to market it? You may have written something that is completely unmarketable. So, if you have, so I'm not sure that answers your question, but I think that is a critical piece. Now, let's just say you've thought that through. What I've been doing, there's different plans. There's different plans of attack, and there's different ways of marketing your script. This is an independent film. It's called Independent Film Academy. So, I've spent my career basically writing and selling scripts in the independent world. Now, it's very much the genre films. It's the true independent film. Most people think of independent film as like the Sundance films, and those are really just anomalies. They're not, I don't know that there's really like a cohesive business model to most of what goes on at Sundance. There's a million films that get made like that, and only one or two, maybe not millions, but let's say, hundreds every year, if not thousands of those Sundance art house films get made every year. Maybe one or two of them break out. So I don't know that that's like a business plan that you can count on. I think there's a certain amount of just catching lightning in a bottle. What I've done is I've written genre films, and I have not really worked at the studio level. And it's not really, I would say it's not necessarily by choice. It would be great to break in at that highest level, but I've just had the most luck writing these sort of, independent genre films. And you can look me up on IMDb to get a kind of a feel for what I'm talking about. So maybe just to answer your question, what I'm doing specifically is I am constantly talking to producers, asking them, and these are producers either I meet through an email or a fax blast. Maybe I meet them on Inktip. Maybe I just meet them at an event or networking, meet them through other people that I know. And I'm constantly asking them, what kind of material are you looking for? So that I kind of have my finger on the pulse of, or at least I try to have my finger on the pulse of what is actually selling. So when I'm writing a script, I have some idea about what I'm going to do with it once I'm done with it. And what I've been having success with the last few years, as I said, is these genre films. So I've been writing these films, and they typically are, very cost conscious. A lot of the producers I'm talking about, there's some sort of a threshold, and I'm not sure the exact number of SAG, like low budget or ultra low budget. It's around $600,000 or $625,000. You got to be below that. So it seems like a lot of producers that I'm dealing with are trying to get films under that number. So let's say around $600,000. So a lot of the scripts that I'm writing are very cost conscious, meaning limited locations, limited sets. And as I said, they're genre films. So they're horrors, thrillers, sci-fi thrillers, not so much comedy and definitely not dramas. So I finish a script. I already have a pretty good idea about what I'm going to do with it. Now, for myself, I have a large database of emails and fax numbers, and that's really been my single biggest source of optioning and selling scripts over the last few years. And this is a service that I offer at my website. So anybody is free to go and use this. There is a small fee to use it, but it's the same list that I'm using. So I finish a script and I basically start sending it out to this email and fax list. And it's basically cold query letters. I write a best log line that I can write. I write the best query letter that I can write, and then I send it out to my email and fax list. I also will do, the blacklist, and I will also do Inktip. I have not had any real luck on the blacklist at all. I think the films that seem to be succeeding there are more higher end studio type projects. I don't know if these sort of low budget genre films are succeeding on the blacklist, but I haven't had a lot of luck on the blacklist. But I do think that there's a lot of potential upside, so I continue to submit my scripts to the blacklist, and then I also submit them to Inktip. And sometimes I haven't had any true successes through Inktip, but I've had some near misses where I've had meetings and almost been hired on projects, almost option stuff. So I do think Inktip can definitely work. So I do Inktip, and then, as I said, I do my email and fax blast list. And then the next component of that is I have a long list of, producers at this point in my career, of producers that I've worked with, or I've maybe they've read something over the years of mine that they liked. They seem genuinely to like it. So I've got all of those people in a folder, a Gmail folder. And it's literally, I created a Gmail folder called Genuinely Liked Something I Wrote. And those people, I label those emails with them. So, there might be 20 or 30 people in there, 40 people in there. And so when I finish a script, I'll send a custom email to each one of those, and just send it out saying, hey, I've just completed this new script. Here's the pitch for it. And I might even start off with a little bit of an opening, like if we met or if they were working on a project, I might say, hey, remember I sent you my script, my baseball comedy script, The Unnatural, a few months ago. You seem to like it. Here's my new script. Or if we've met or I know something about what they're working on, I might just make some small talk. Hey, how's that project going with that other, with that actor or that director or something. So that's basically, I would say, sort of once I finish the script, that's kind of what I go about doing to get the thing optioned and then hopefully sold.
Now, do you ever talk to producers before you begin a screenplay and say, and pitch an idea before you actually write the screenplay?
Well, yes and no. I would say at kind of the level that I'm operating on, it's unlikely that I'm going to get any upfront money. So yes, I am talking to producers constantly, and I'm trying to understand what they think they can sell, and not sell, what they think they can get funded, because that's really the goal, is to get these movies funded and writing a script that they think they can sell. So I do talk to them, and I do. Now, I don't necessarily write something 100% specifically for them, but I mean, as an example, over the last, I would say 12 months, I've been getting a lot of producers saying, sci-fi thrillers, they can play well overseas. There's a lot of potential upside. If the script in the movie is really good, there's a lot of potential upside. So a lot of the producers excuse me, a lot of the producers I've been talking with have been telling me sci-fi thriller. So I just completed a sci-fi thriller a couple of months ago. So I don't, and I sent it to those producers that said they wanted it. I did send it to them to see if they might be interested in it, but I don't necessarily write, like they don't necessarily give me an outline. I mean, I have producers that it's a difficult thing. I don't like to get in. I mean, I do have some producers sometimes that will come to me with like an outline and say, hey, would you write this on spec? And, then, I'll go out and try and sell it. I don't like doing that. If they want to pay me some money, I have done that. I mean, that's just a paid writing assignment. I've definitely done that. But writing something specifically for them that they somehow have like a controlling interest in, you get tied to that producer. And then when it doesn't work out with that producer, you're basically sort of stuck. There becomes some legal issues about who owns the rights to what, if they presented you with a treatment. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, I mean, I do definitely talk to producers, and I do definitely try and write stuff that the producers who I'm talking with, stuff that I think that they can potentially like, that they'll potentially like and potentially get funded.
Now, the majority of these production companies, are they all kind of in the same level in terms of the stuff that they're producing? Is it primarily direct to VOD market stuff, or is it what are the production companies that you have the most luck with that kind of screenplay?
I don't know that there's a crystal clear answer on that. As I said earlier, I definitely think there's a lot of producers that I'm kind of talking to, and they seem to be in that like $500,000-$600,000 budget range. But I also think that most of the producers, I mean, every producer that I talk to, ultimately, they want to be making the $100 million films, just like I want to be writing the $100 million films. So ultimately, every producer I talk with, and in fact, this is a good example. I'm currently writing a sci-fi, action adventure script, and I'm writing it with a partner, and we've kind of wanted to, we've in our discussions, we said, well, let's write something that's higher end, sort of a real studio level project. One of the producers who I optioned a couple of scripts to him last year. He tried to get them funding. They kind of didn't work out, but we've kept a relationship going. He's looking for something. He has a video game director that he's working with, and I pitched him this project, and he said, oh, that sounds perfect. So, when I finish this script, I'll definitely give it to him. I think there's a chance that he will option it, but he's producing movies that are in this, less than $1 million. Over the last, let's say, 5 years, he's done maybe 3, 4, 5 of these movies that are less than $1 million. But like everybody in Hollywood, he wants to produce this, the $50 million, the $80 million, the $100 million movie. So I think most production companies are, at least on some level, trying to, level up and produce something above what they maybe have done before. So most, realistically, is this guy going to get this movie funded? It's going to be a big budget sci-fi action adventure. It's going to be $100 million movie. Is this producer going to be able to get it, funded? I don't know, but, he'll try, and I have a relationship with him. So that might be my best bet, but everyone's trying to level up. But, I don't know exactly what all these production companies are thinking in terms of what they might be able to fund or not fund. You can look them up on IMDb, and most of the ones I'm dealing with, they are, I would say, less than $1 million is most of the films that they're doing, but they want to produce bigger stuff.
Now, when you send a screenplay off and you have interest in it, and let's say the best case scenario is they're interested, what is the next step after they say that they're interested? Do you give them a pitch, or where do you go from there? Usually. Yeah, no, sure. Let's go through that thing. So as I said, I do a lot of cold query letters, and I've had a lot of luck with them over the last few years. So yeah, I have a log line, a basic query letter with a log line, and then I have a nice little sort of a paragraph that is my my resume biography. So that's basically what the query letter is. Would you like to read this script? Here's the log line. Here's who I am. Let me know if you want to read the script. That's sort of the summation of the query letter. So I send that off, and then what will typically happen is, and we're talking about less than 1% of these thousands of query letters I'm sending out. Might get less than 1% that say, okay, I'll read the script. And that's totally fine. I'm doing it on such a large scale, as I said, sending out thousands and thousands of query letters, that even at less than 1%, I'm still getting dozens of script requests. So then people will email me back. Sometimes they'll phone call, but generally they'll just email back, say, yeah, this sounds like a project that I would be interested in reading. Can you send it along? I would say that's
of the people who request the script, or the responses, the positive responses I get, that's probably 98% of them. Every once in a while, I will get somebody saying, can you send me a longer synopsis? So then I have a longer 1 or 2 page synopsis. I'll send them a 1 or 2 page synopsis. Every once in a while, someone will look at my website. You can go to ashleymeyers.com. You can see all of my various other projects. So sometimes I'll send my query letter out and I will put my website in there. So every once in a while, someone will say, well, this project you're pitching isn't for me, but I would read one of your other projects. So the bottom line is so I get these positive responses, and typically it's a PDF. Every now and then someone will want a hard copy, but most of the time someone will say, hey, send me a PDF. So I'll email them the PDF. And I would say 90% of the time I never hear anything back. I probably should be a little better about following up with them. I definitely recommend, but sometimes you'll start to get some responses within a week or two of people who you've sent the script to, and they'll say, yeah, it's not quite what we're looking for. No, thank you. We're going to pass. Every once in a while, you'll get someone who they don't, for whatever reason, they don't think this project is right, but they seem to like your writing. And so I'll typically respond to those people with, hey, if it just seems like a pat email where they just really were not digging the script at all, I will typically, and they respond basically it's a pass, I typically will just let those go, and I won't follow up. If they seem to actually like the writing, but this project wasn't quite right, I will then ask them, hey, what kind of stuff are you looking for? And by the way, again, I will mention my website. Maybe there's something else you might find. And if they tell me what they're looking for, then I can look at my log lines myself, and I can basically say, well, what about this script and what about this script? Try and get them to read some other stuff. And then, so that's like most of the people who respond are passing on the script. And then a few people will get back to you. There's all sorts of offers, once they've read the script, they like the script, there's all sorts of offers. It's everything from soup to nuts. I mean, sometimes, as I said, I've written some sort of lower budget stuff that's pretty contained. So on sort of the low end of the spectrum, sometimes I'll get, directors and producers, and they basically want to make the movie for, a $30,000 budget, ultra micro budget, project. And then sometimes you'll get people that, they want to option the script, and then it becomes a negotiation. I've never had anybody just flat out want to buy the script. There's always an option, and it's usually for at least 6 months. Generally, they want like a 6-month option with the right to renew it for, maybe 3 other 6-month blocks. So you're talking like maybe 2 years, basically, they want to option it. Generally, in this climate, most of the time, it's very difficult to get any real money out of a producer. So a lot of times they just want to do a free option. What I typically try and do is get them say, well, how about I give you a free 90-day option, and then it's $500 for an additional 6 months. At least try and get something out of them. I've probably had 20 or 30 options over the course of my career, and I can look at the 5 or the 6 scripts that I've actually sold. In every case, I've never had a free option. I would say at least half, if not more, of the options I've done have been free options, and I've never had a free option actually make it into production and get made. So that's definitely worth considering. I also, one other thing that I highly consider, when I'm negotiating, there's a lot of considerations. Another thing is all the people who have bought my scripts and then actually produced a movie from the script, every single instance, the person had a track record of making at least 1 or 2 films before my film. And I've optioned a lot of scripts to like first-time producers, fresh out of film school, or maybe they've worked as like a line producer, but they've never actually been a producer. And again, none of those options have ever actually made it. It's really difficult to make a movie. So these are the things I consider. If someone has never produced a movie before and they want a free option, I'm a lot less likely to give it to them, because I basically know that's probably not going to go anywhere. If a producer has a track record and they want a free option, I'm maybe a little more open to it, because I know that at least they've produced some movies and they at least have a chance at getting this movie produced. Ideally, they have a track record and you can get a few dollars out of them. As I said, typically if I can give them a free 90-day option, that will satiate some of them, and they'll figure that they can get some they can decide if they have interest in the script or not in 90 days. And then if they think that, hey, this script actually has legs, then they might pay the $500 or $1,000 for the additional 6 months.
Now, when somebody options your screenplay, what are the legal issues of that? Are they able to make the film with the option, or do they have to actually purchase the screenplay to make the film and have the rights?
Correct. The option agreement, and everyone asks me questions. I mean, I'm no lawyer, and so you definitely would, as with any legal, legally binding document, you would want to seek, the help of a, professional attorney on this. And I have an attorney that I work with that reviews all of my contracts at this stage of my career. So most of the option agreement, basically, you're giving them, it is what it says. It's literally an option. The producer has an exclusive right to purchase your material, and for that, as I said, they will generally pay you something for that exclusive right. And that means you cannot not then take it out to other producers and sell it to them. This producer is secure in knowing that if they find the financing, if they package this film, they feel secure that you're not out there trying to sell this to other producers. And that's basically what it is. But then generally there's generally like a payment schedule, but just to make it simple, generally the option agreement will say something like, on the first day of principal photography, payment, the option must be exercised on the first day, and payment must be made on the first day of principal photography. So, basically they're not going to go and shoot your movie until they've actually paid you. And that's for their benefit too. I mean, they want to make sure when they go into production, truthfully, they want to pay you as soon as they know that they have funding, because if there's going to be a problem, if you're going to, refuse to sign the final, purchase agreement, they want to know that as soon as possible. So it's in the producer's best interest to pay you really as soon as possible. And that's what I've always found. Generally speaking, as soon as the producers get funding, they're happy to pay you and buy the script, because at that point they know the movie's going to get made. And so the sooner the better. But yes, they do have to pay you. They have to exercise the option and pay you before they go into production.
And is the option typically a percentage of what the final price of the screenplay will be?
No, it's really not. And I think with the WGA, like if you're under a WGA contract, I think it might be 10% or something. I'm not in the WGA, so I'm not up on all that. But as I said, with the option price, where I'm basically dealing with these producers, it's you get what you can take, and however good your negotiation skills are, that's how much money you will be able to get. And it has no bearing. I won't say no bearing, but it has very little bearing on the actual purchase price of the material. It is often the amount of money. Like, let's just say, to make the math easy, it's $1,000, and let's say they're going to buy the script for $30,000. They can take that $1,000 and apply it against the final purchase agreement. So when they exercise the option, they don't pay you $30,000; they pay you $29,000, because they've already given you $1,000. So the option money, generally speaking, it will apply against the final purchase price.
Is there a general guideline in this kind of range of screenwriting in this type of film? And I know it's kind of a general question, but what are screenplays going for? I mean, just for people who are out there writing screenplays, what can they expect to be paid for a low budget feature film screenplay?
Sure. I mean, I think I've always found that it's pretty uniform, and I've never really had too many producers balk. I mean, the bottom line with these things, I mean, a movie that's being made for $600,000, I mean, it seems like a lot of money if it's just like in one person's bank account. But to make a movie and to spread that over the things, it's like there's not really that much negotiation that you're going to be able to do. And what I've found, I mean, the number that I've basically found is, and I've never had a producer balk at this, the writer can expect to get between 2 and 3% of the production budget. I think the WGA has their own scale, WGA minimums and stuff. But on these sorts of independent films, 2 to 3% of the production budget is what you can expect. And there's some legalese in that. There's on a $500,000 movie, there might be $80,000 worth of completion bond costs, financing charges. Like if they're financing the movie through a bank, there's certain things that will sort of bring the budget down, and you may not be paid as a writer on some of those additional expenses, as I said, like completion bonds and finance charges. So a $500,000 budget might only be $420,000, but you're going to get between 2 and 3%. And I mean, that works, frankly, even on the micro budget level. If someone is going to make your movie for $100,000, the most you really can expect as a screenwriter is $3,000. And I mean, that makes sense. It's like if they're going to produce an entire movie on a $100,000 budget, they can't pay the writer $30,000. I mean, that just economically doesn't make sense. They can afford to pay the writer, $2,000 to $3,000. And that's really the extent of the negotiation. Are you going to get 2%, 2.5%, or are you going to get 3% of the production budget? I've never found anything really outside of those numbers. So it's pretty simple math. $500,000 budget is, if you get close to the 3%, you're going to get about $15,000.
Let's say you sell the script and everything works out, following this road. At what point do you continue working with the screenplay? Is there a contract that says, okay, you'll have like a title card, you'll have these things, and you'll have rewrites or anything like that? Or is it just theirs? At the point that you sell it, they can change it, they can do with it what they want to?
Well, yeah, and that point is not when you sell it. That point is when you option it to them.
Okay.
But all that stuff, I mean, there's sort of like, there's like the option agreement, and there's always a statement in the option agreement that says, when they exercise the option, you agree to sign a document with all the customary things in the industry. And that's like later down the road when they actually do the purchase. And that's a much longer document. But these things that you're talking about, like, yes, you'll be given screen credit with your own title card, that stuff is worked out ahead of time, and it's in the option agreement. All that stuff is very, very important. Rewrites, exactly what you're saying. That stuff is important. It's important to understand, and that's the other big thing. I mentioned those other two things. Is when I'm deciding if I should option this script to a producer, that's the third very, very large key thing to pay attention to, is the rewrites. So there's those three things. There's the is this producer going to pay for the option? Do they have a track record as a producer? And the third thing is how much rewrites do they want, and what kind of rewrites do they want, and are they going to basically, in my opinion, destroy this script? And it's kind of a sliding scale. The more I think they're going to destroy my script, the more that I'm going to charge them, and the less inclined I am to take a small option fee or a small fee on the payment. And generally speaking, what I've found is producers, that's the one thing I'll say, before you sign the option agreement, that's the one moment that the writer actually has some real leverage, because the producer has just read dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of screenplays that he doesn't like. He's read yours, and now he likes it, and now he's trying to cajole you into signing this option agreement. So it's the one moment where you have leverage. And what I've found is, generally speaking, you can kind of just ask the producer these questions, and I've never found that producers really are not fairly candid. And you can ask them, well, what sort of budget do you anticipate making this film for? And generally, whatever budget they talk about, we're going to make it for $1 million. Generally, whatever budget they mention will be kind of an optimistic estimate, so it'll probably be well below that. I've never had it go way higher than that. And so a lot of times producers will want to put like a floor and a ceiling in the option agreement. Like, okay, but if we do this film for $5 million, we're not going to pay you $250,000. We're going to cap you at like $100,000. And generally speaking, that's fine. But the thing that you want to do is you want to ask them, hey, what's the minimum you're going to produce this movie? Oh, I would say $1 million. Great. Well, if I'm getting 3% of the budget, then let's put a floor of $30,000 into the contract. So in these early stages, you can negotiate a lot of these things. And as I said, you have leverage because the producer doesn't want to go back to the drawing board and have to read another couple hundred scripts to find that one he likes. He likes yours. So this is the one moment where you can actually ask for some things and get them. And that's the rewrites. And that's the third point I wanted to make. So you want to ask the producer, well, what kind of rewrites do you see making? And this is not, you don't want to argue with the producer. You don't want to like do a lot of talking. This is the moment for you to listen and just listen to his ideas and decide if you think his ideas are good. Again, producers are always unbelievably candid at this moment, and they'll generally tell you, oh, well, I think we should completely rewrite this and completely rewrite that, and you just nod your head politely, and then you mull it over and you decide if you think that's really the proper vision for your script. And you have to do that before you sign the option agreement. Once you sign the option agreement, they basically can do anything they want to the script, and they have the right to eventually buy and make that movie. So once you've signed the option agreement, you don't have any real leverage at that point. You've signed your leverage away. So you definitely want to take note of what kind of rewrites they want. Are you going to be involved with those rewrites? That can be a very painful process. And a lot of times, I mean, it's like a lot of times, a lot of these, I'll have some old script that I'm not doing anything with, and it's like I can tell the producer is going to completely ruin the script, at least in my estimation. But it's like, well, as long as I don't have to do the rewrites, just let him do it and see if he can actually get the movie made. So they're definitely, these are things to consider.
Right. So the anybody trying to sell a screenplay should really think of the option as the moment when they should negotiate rather than the selling part of the screenplay.
Absolutely. There is no negotiation when you sell, because you're basically saying in the option agreement, I will sell you this script for X amount of dollars, and here for this, I'm going to get a credit. I'm going to get, the first right of refusal for writing prequel, sequel, remakes. There's going to be a bunch of things in this option agreement, but once the option agreement is spelled out, there's no more negotiation. Everything is decided in the option agreement. And then once they want to purchase the script, all they have to do at that point is, send you a letter and cut you a check, and they've exercised the option. There's nothing you can do in terms of negotiating at that point.
And they send you a contract and you have your lawyer look at it and all that?
Correct. And I mean, the option agreements can be very simple. I mean, I've signed option agreements that are just like 3 pages. I mean, we've covered there might be some things that I'm forgetting, but most of the things, as I said, the amount of the time, the option agreement will be about how long is the option good for, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. It'll talk about how much they're going to have to pay you when they want to exercise the option, and they're going to talk about your credit, and they're going to talk about there might be something like producer's net, maybe a little bit of back end. There's going to be, but that's it. There's like 5 or 6 main points in this option agreement. So I've signed agreements that are like, 3-5 pages. They can be short. Sometimes producers will present these 20 or 30 page option agreements, and that's usually just a nuisance more than anything else. But the option agreements are fairly simple, but it lays out all this stuff that we've been talking about explicitly. It explicitly says this is what's going to happen. And that's basically that.
Are there any red flags that go up sometimes when you're talking to a producer and they're like, okay, well, maybe this wouldn't be the best idea to sell to this guy?
Not really. I mean, as I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've signed dozens of option agreements, and, I don't know. I've never felt like producers were, and I'll take that back. There definitely are some times where I felt like the producers are sort of, they're hoping that they've found a babe in the woods who doesn't really understand how everything works. But once they understand that that's not the case, as I said, all this stuff, there's not that much to negotiate. It's like, I had a producer offer me last year. They just basically were like, well, and I don't think they were trying to be shady or anything, but they wanted to make the movie on a lower budget. I knew they wanted to do a lot of rewrites, and they said, we'll give you $2,000 for the script and we'll just buy it outright. And I was like, well, why would I do that? I don't need the $2,000, and I know you're going to rewrite it and ruin it. So, it's like, what's in it for me? And so there have been those situations where I've turned it down, but I mean, they were going to make the movie for less than $100,000. So I don't think the $2,000 was an inappropriate amount. Like, they weren't trying to cheat me, but I do think that there was a disconnect where there just wasn't anything in it for me. As I said, I knew they'd already talked about, we got this friend who's a writer, and they already told me what their ideas were, and I didn't think any of them were any good, and they were only going to pay me $2,000, and it's like, what do I need another crappy credit to my name? I don't need the $2,000. So what am I getting out of this process? So, I didn't sell it to them, but I don't know if there's any red flags, like people are trying to cheat. I don't know. I mean, there's all these horror stories, about, producers, wolf, the lambs being led to the slaughter, but it's like, I've never found that. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm more business minded and I think these things through a little bit. But I've never had any real problems, where I felt like producers were trying to cheat me, and there's red flags. I would say the one scam that I've heard about over and over again is where so-called producers find a writer who is new, and they'll be like, oh, this movie's awesome, we need a little seed money, can you put up the first $20,000, the first $10,000, the first $50,000? I've heard of that scam where producers try and get money from the actual writers, supposedly as seed money. And that is the scam that I've seen numerous times. So definitely avoid something like that. I mean, the producer is the one who should be raising the money. If you're going to have to put up the money and you're going to have to go help to raise the money, which is basically paying this upfront seed money, I would say that is a scam, and that is something to definitely avoid. You shouldn't be paying a producer to option your movie. They should be paying you.
Now, you mentioned the blacklist, and I know that you're not all that keen on those guys, in terms of the service they offer. But do you think that if you're trying to sell a screenplay or get somebody to look at it, have you ever heard of anybody using their scores to kind of say, hey, look what scores I got, to show that the screenplay was good in some way?
Yeah, I think that would be, I have heard of that, and I think that's a perfectly good, and I think you're being maybe a little bit, reading in a little bit. I don't think I think the blacklist is a good service. As I said, I think there's enormous upside to it. I just think again, when you're marketing your script, you need to look at the blacklist and look at the scripts that are succeeding on it. Low budget genre films are not the films that are succeeding. Go and look at the films that are getting the high scores there and decide if your film fits into that sort of template or that, is similar to that. So I think it's a matter of, the annual blacklist comes out. I mean, it's usually more sort of very original, non-commercial fare, and that's what and I actually the podcast episode that's coming out this Monday, December 8th, it's a podcast with Corey Mandel, who's a screenwriter and a teacher, and we actually talk about this. His whole sort of premise is, write something that's hugely original and just completely unique to your voice, and that's the best way to break into studio screenwriting. And I totally agree with that assessment, and I think if that's the kind of script you've written, then the blacklist is an excellent place to put it. That's not what I'm writing. I'm writing, as I said, lower budget genre films, and they're not necessarily getting good marks on the blacklist, even though I am able to option and sell these scripts to actual real producers. So I think it's a matter of just figuring out where your script fits in, and then trying to find the market for it.
Aside from doing the query letters and following that process, are there other ways that you think that you can kind of make contacts with people and break into the industry as a writer?
Yeah, we've just talked about the blacklist. I definitely think that Inktip, and what I have found on Inktip is most of the producers on Inktip are more of this ilk that I'm talking about, the independent genre film. That seems to be what these producers are looking for more so. I mean, not in every case. There's no absolutes, but I would say if you've written sort of a lower budget genre film, Inktip seems like a great place. I mean, Inktip has a lot of successes. I've interviewed on my podcast, Gerald LeBaron, who's the founder of it. I mean, he seems like a really good guy. I know from producers I've talked to, he is out there like calling producers on a daily basis saying, hey man, if you're looking for material, maybe we can help you find it. So he's he's really out there fighting for writers and trying to get producers material. So Inktip is another good thing. Just basic networking. I mean, I've heard of people, this is not something I've done, but I've heard of people networking on social media, whether it be Twitter or Facebook, friending these people and just trying to engaging producers on social media. And eventually, once you get to know them, at least superficially on social media, after a while, then maybe you could pitch them one of your scripts. And I've heard of that actually working, where I had a writer that actually he just engaged people. And again, it's not, you don't just, hey man, I got a script, will you read it? You engage them over the course of several weeks and months and actually talk about, respond to their tweets and make intelligent remarks. And then once they get to know you and they start maybe responding to some of your tweets, then maybe it's time that you can ask them to read one of your scripts. And I know at least one writer who optioned a script that way. So I think that's another way, especially if you're not living in Hollywood, if you don't have any money to spend on something like Inktip or my selling your screenplay email and fax blast service. I think that's a great way. Just it takes a little bit of time and effort, but I think it's a great way to meet people and potentially option or sell something.
Now, what are the typical mistakes you see screenwriters make? Somebody's written their screenplay and they want to get it out to people. What's like the taboo thing that you see people doing that really doesn't work at all or kind of turns off producers?
Yeah, I'm not sure. As I said, I would say, and I've written about this on my blog. The number one mistake I think people make is, writing a script and not considering exactly how they're going to market this script before they've written it. And sort of a symptom of that is writing a script and then trying to write the log line once you're finished the script. I mean, you should write your log line before you write your script so that you have a marketable log line, a good, solid log line. You don't want to write a script where you can't write a good log line for it. If you can't write a good log line for it, I'm not sure you should be writing that script. So those are the kinds of things, more just thinking through the process before you actually start on your script, I think is imperative. And that's what I mean, I get a lot of these people on my forum and my blog, and they've written that, it's the passion piece, my experience at camp, or my experience, with the Big Brother program. It's these are like maybe heartwarming stories, but I don't know where you're going to be able to sell a script like that. So I would definitely consider that before you start to send it out, before you even start to write. Consider where you're going to potentially market this script and understand how it's going to fit in and what you're going to do with it.
Do you find that the market has kind of become oversaturated because, making a film has gotten so much cheaper with technology and everything? Are there just production companies? It seems like they're just sprouting up all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, that should be a good thing for writers, because more productions means more stuff is getting produced, and more scripts are getting produced. So that should be a good thing. I don't know. I mean, maybe there is. I don't know. I mean, I just know, as I said, when I started sort of in the mid to late 90s, I don't know that it's any easier now. I don't really notice a huge difference. I mean, it's always been tough to make a movie. I definitely know. I think it was 1995, The English Patient, whatever year it won the Academy Award, and it was like literally all five of the films in the best picture films that year, the English Patient won. All five of them were, independent films like The English Patient. And I know, as I said, that sort of bled into the late 90s, the early 2000s, where there was a kind of I saw sort of a real surge and an interest. Everybody wanted to make, these great independent films. And so there did seem to be sort of a surge at that point. But I don't know. It's always been tough to sell a script and to make a movie, to sell a movie and to make a movie and actually have that movie make a profit. It's always been a tough business. And maybe it's tougher now than before, but it's just always been tough. So I don't know.
Let me talk a little bit about your process of writing a screenplay. In general, how long does it take you, more or less, from start to finish, from when you begin with the concept and begin, outlining or whatever, to say, how many drafts do you usually do? Like 5, 6?
Everyone has to find their own process. I mean, most of the time, if you get like a paid writing assignment, most of the time, they're going to give you 8 to 12 weeks to write a script. You might have an outline to start with or some loose story idea, but so if you're going to be a professional writer and get paid writing assignments, you're going to have to produce scripts in a couple of months or less. You're going to have to be able to write quickly. On a spec script, I would say my process is probably more like 6 months. I mean, there's no like set deadlines with a spec script. You're kind of writing at your own pace. So I would say it takes me about 6 months. I'm in a writer's group, which I really like. And with that writer's group, you present basically about 25 pages once a month. So, after about 4 months, you've basically presented a full script. You rewrite different sections and represent it. But I can write a script in about 6 months. I would say there's maybe 2 or 3 drafts in that 6 months. I'd spend a lot of time doing the outline. So my first drafts, I feel like, are reasonably good and presentable. I've presented it to this writer's group. So by the time I have kind of what I would consider a first draft, which is, past maybe the rough draft stage, I would say I generally have something that I'm okay with sending out. But generally, there's a rough draft and then a first draft and then maybe kind of like a polished draft where you just do some additional tweaks. So you're talking maybe 2 or 3 drafts, and then I'll start sending the script out. And generally, if you option the script, there's going to be some rewriting at that point. But I would say that's kind of the extent of it.
Do you send out a screenplay with the idea that the producer's going to look at it and kind of judge it moreover for the concept and the viability and how much of a profit they can make versus and say to themselves, hey, I can do a couple of rewrites and then it'll be perfect. You know, you don't send it out like you don't spend 10 months making sure everything is absolutely perfect. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to make it quite sound like that because I'm pretty
Okay.
I'm pretty happy with the script when I send it out. But I basically know that anybody who options the script is going to want some additional rewrites.
Now, when you're writing, what is your process for writing? You start with the idea, and what do you do? Do you do note cards? Do you put together an outline with, like, Save the Cat or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I definitely have an outline. I like Save the Cat, so understanding those the Blake Snyder beat sheet. As I mentioned, I'll generally start with a log. I'll generally start with just sort of like a loose idea, and I'll the first thing I generally will try and do is put it into a coherent log line. And then, I'll try and put it into a loose Blake Snyder beat sheet, and then I'll start flushing out the outline from there. And then eventually you end up with, a pretty flushed out outline. And then you go in and you start writing the script. But I would, spending, if I'm going to spend 6 months writing a spec script, spending a month or 6 weeks on just the outline is not at all unusual, maybe even 2 months, and then 4 months writing the script, something like that. So spend your time. I advise people spend your time on the outline because that will save you. Make the macro decisions when you're in the outlining stage, and then don't make macro decisions when you have final draft open because if your script is going to take a total left turn, which is totally fine, go back to the outline and make sure that it's going to work in your complete outline. Just be careful about making these decisions where your script is going to get sort of off, completely off target. If you really feel like that's a direction you want to go, close final draft and go back to the outline. But yeah, I do a lot of outlining.
Do you always know what your ending is going to be before you start?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the outline is pretty complete, coherent version of the script. I mean, there's all the basic story beats and all the basic scenes are laid out. I don't know if I've ever counted. I mean, Blake Snyder will take his Blake Snyder beat sheet and put it into like a 40-point outline. I don't know that I've ever counted how many scenes I have or sequences I have in my outlines, but 40 sounds about right. So I generally have a pretty solid outline. Definitely know the ending, definitely know the beginning, and most of the beats in the middle as well.
Do you have any tricks that you've learned over time that kind of help you write?
Well, I think one thing, and I've heard other writers do this too, especially in the outlining stage, is, don't get caught up on something that you can't figure out. Just keep filling in. Like the outlines, it might be like 2 pages. So you can see the entire thing on one computer screen and just start filling in the parts so that there's no sort of friction like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then you just sit there, for an hour and don't do anything because you don't know what to do. Just skip it, especially in the outlining stage. Skip to the places that are easy. What your ending is going to be. So write up your ending in the outline. What's going to happen in the middle. There's some scenes, you might have one scene in mind, but you don't quite know where it goes. Write the basic, bullet points of that scene for your outline. So just keep going over your outline and filling in the easy parts. And and I think what you'll find is you might get your outline like 80% done, 90% done before you actually really hit a true problem. And then you might need to take some time, and there might be some, staring at the computer term. But I would say that's my biggest tip is just, just do the stuff that's easy. And that probably is, I would say, even for final draft. Once you're in final draft writing, if you get stuck on a scene, just move on to the next scene. You've got an outline, so you basically know what's going to be in there. The other tip I'd have is don't be afraid to write poorly. I think a lot of writers are perfectionists, and just don't be afraid to write terrible stuff. And rewriting it, I've found, is a lot easier than writing. So if you have a clear outline, you can sit there and you can get the basics of the scene, even if it's terrible. You can get the basics of the scene in there, and then move on, and then later you can go back and kind of tweak that scene and make it better. And a lot of times you might find it's not nearly as bad as you thought when you actually first did it.
How do you write characters or figure out who your characters are?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my outline, I will generally take a new section and I will just start, free form writing about this character, just basic stuff, maybe where they're from, what they're about, what their point of view is. I generally try and maybe think of a person, maybe that I know that was kind of amusing or funny or interesting, and maybe give their dialogue the same sort of cadence as this person I know. I mean, it might not be like every character trait that person had, but there might be certain character traits that a person I knew in real life, I'll give it to this specific character. And I might even combine them. Maybe there's two or three people I've known that did two or three interesting things, and I'll combine those into a character. But just the more real you can make them, the better off you're going to be. The more sort of clear idea you have of them, the better off you're going to be when you actually start writing your script and start writing their dialogue and start writing how they react and how they, act in your screenplay. So
when you do like a second or third draft, is there anything that you do in between your drafts that kind of like, I mean, do you print out the whole screenplay and like go through it with a pen and work on it like that? Or what is your process for rewriting?
Again, I'm in this writers group, so I'm definitely workshopping in the writers group. But I mean, for the most part, once I kind of get into final draft, as I said, I like outlining because I feel like I get lost. Once you have this 100-page document, you can't even remember like what scene came before this, what scene came before that. And so I try and just make sure my outline is detailed so that when I get into final draft, I'm not making like major revisions. So these different drafts, these different drafts are not, there's not hopefully huge swings and stuff. If I have to make like a major story change, I will go back into the outline and kind of look at it there and piece it together in the outline and then go into the final draft and, copy and paste, cut and paste, whatever it takes.
And you're getting feedback from the writers. I mean, do you guys sit around and
Exactly.
read everybody else's stuff?
Exactly. Other people read their stuff. You read your stuff. We have actors so it's like a cold reading type of thing. Actors sit on a stage. They read the material, the 25 pages. And then there's writers in the audience. And then so let's say there's 25 pages. It takes about 25 minutes, 30 minutes to read it. Then the actors get off the stage. You go up as the writer on stage. And then the other, 8 or 10 writers in the group, they will give you notes on there. And the actors will too. The actors sometimes have good notes as well. So the actors and the writers who just listen to your material will now give you notes on your material.
Now, are there any common things that you see kind of novice writers doing in screenplays that are kind of things that they need to grow out of, or I know a lot of people write, for example, what characters are thinking and things like that.
I would say the biggest thing that I see or one of the biggest problems I see is that they're in novice writers is you're reading the script and you kind of just don't quite understand what it's about. You don't quite know where it's going. And with really well-written professional scripts, like you always understand sort of what the goals are and what's sort of at stake. And, as I said, I think a lot of writers, they get into final draft too quickly and they write a bunch of scenes and you're just like, I don't know where this movie's going. I don't know sort of what the direction it is, and not in a good way, like, oh my God, it's so surprising. It's just like, I just don't know quite where this is going. And I always look at something like Wizard of Oz as such a great example of, classic structure. It's like, I mean, everything is very on the nose. She gets to the Munchkins and they say, go to the wizard. He'll help you get home. She gets to the wizard and he says, I'll help you get home, but go get the broom from the witch. She goes and gets the broom. And it's like the goals are just very clear. You understand sort of the direction. There's twists and there's turns and there's surprises, but you understand the goal is to get home, and what she needs to do to get home is A, B, and C. So I would say that's very important. A lot of novice scripts that I read don't quite understand that.
You find that usually by a certain page, you're like, okay, I know this isn't going in. I mean, I usually find like page 15 is right around when, if you don't know what's going on, you're kind of like, okay.
Yeah. The other thing, and I would say go read some really good professional scripts. I mean, I just read the first 10 or 12 pages of the script, Unforgiven. You can almost tell like that script, you're reading it and it's like the writer is so clearly in control of what you're seeing and how the emotions you're having and what you're thinking about these characters. And again, what I find from novice writers is you don't really, like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this character. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this situation. A scene happens and you don't know how am I emotionally supposed to react to this scene, because the writer is sort of not in control of the material. And you read really well done professional scripts, and the writer understands how the reader is going to be interpreting these words on the page, and is able to, like, pull you along and guide you along, and you just feel confidence in that writer. And it's and I can almost tell, I mean, you say, well, is there a page count? You can almost tell from page 1. I mean, go read something like Shawshank Redemption, or go read something like Unforgiven, or I just read the first pages of Natural Born Killers. Go read just the first page, and it's like there's a conciseness and a sort of a deftness to the writing. I mean, the writing is so concise, and the writer is so in control of what is being said. And there's every word on the page is in sync with every other word. And you can almost tell that from the first, sentence. I taught tennis. I played tennis and taught tennis, in high school and college. And, to this day, it's like I can literally see someone hit, not even hit, like take half a swing with a tennis racket, and I can tell, maybe not precisely, but I can tell pretty roughly how good someone is just by, half a swing with a tennis racket, how they're holding the racket and swinging. And it's like, I don't need to see them play a set or a game or even a point. I can literally just watch them hold the racket and swing at the ball one time, and I can almost, within a certain range, tell how good they are. And I would say the same thing for screenwriters. Read some of these really good scripts and really pay attention to how you're feeling and how you're interpreting the words, and then read your own script and be honest and tell, even after a paragraph or a half page, are you really that in control of the words, like these professional writers?
We mentioned Unforgiven and Natural Born Killers. Are there any other screenplays that you feel like are just a must for screenwriters to read?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good ones. I mean, and a lot of this just has to do with the ones that I've recently read. I mean, Legally Blonde. It's like and I'm not like the demographic for a movie like that, but it's like I saw the movie recently and I read the script, and it's like, it's just so well executed. The character is just original and fresh, and there's so many great highs and lows. I just read the Shawshank Redemption. I mean, obviously it's kind of an undisputed great script. It's like, go read some of those. I like to go to just do a Google search for IMDb top 250 movies, and there's a list of the top 250 movies on IMDb as users have rated them, and Shawshank Redemption is number 1. But look through those top movies and read some of those scripts. I would say the more modern movies are probably better examples to read. Some of the ones I just mentioned, Shawshank Redemption, Natural Born Killers, Unforgiven. I mean, some of the more modern scripts are better to read than say Casablanca or The Wizard of Oz, just because the style and the formatting was so different with those scripts. It's hard to really draw parallels. But yeah, so I think there's just, I read another script I read recently, or within the last year anyways. What's the Jake Gyllenhaal movie where he's a soldier in this little time capsule?
Time Code?
Yeah, Source Code.
Yeah, that's great.
Source
Code. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's just a great script, man. Just go read that and just really pay attention to your emotions and how you're feeling about the characters, and try and understand, as a writer, how you can accomplish that, how you can make people have genuine empathy. I mean, that's what writing is really all about, is evoking these emotions, and how can you do that with words on the page, with just, a keyboard and a blank screen? How can you evoke emotion in people and get people to really care about your characters and your situations, and make people laugh and cry? And these really good scripts do that. So, Source Code, Unforgiven. Yeah, there's lots of great ones. I think even reading bad scripts is probably a good exercise for writers too. So just read scripts, man. I mean, I have over 1,000 scripts on the Selling Your Screenplay library, just sellingyourscreenplay.com/library. So just go through there and just start reading scripts. I mean, it's all all free. I mean, there's tons of places you can find free scripts online.
In terms of learning the craft of screenwriting, or do you have any specific? We talked about Blake Snyder, and you've mentioned Sid Field. Are there any like really influential books for you that people could check out if they're just beginning screenwriting?
Yeah, no, those I would definitely read. Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. I like all three of his books. So Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, and Save the Cat Strikes Back. Sid Field's Screenplay is very an instrumental. It's a kind of a classic screenwriting books to read that. Another good one is The Art of Dramatic Writing by Leos Egry. Okay. It's an older book, and it was written more sort of for playwrights than screenwriters, but he's all about character and, finding your character, and, drama is about sort of the conflict with characters. So a lot of what you read in Leos Egry is very applicable to screenwriting. But I would say if you read those three, Sid Field's Screenplay, Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, and Leos Egry's The Art of Dramatic Writing, I would say you'd be in pretty good shape.
No Robert McKee in there?
I'm trying to think if I've ever even read his book. I think I have. I think the Robert McKee book is good. What's the other one? Michael Haig. I don't know if I read the Robert McKee book, but I have read the Michael Haig book. It just doesn't stand out. I don't know. But Blake Snyder I like because it's just so accessible. It's like, I'm a slow reader, and I bet I can read the whole book in 6 hours. So it's like really a quick read. So it's like, and then, what does it cost? $10 on Amazon or something. So it's like, there's just so little downside to just picking it up and reading it, and take with it what you want. Use it however you find it useful. So I don't know. I can't remember if I've read the Robert McKee book or not. I'm pretty sure I've read the Michael Haig book, and, it seemed like it was perfectly good. But I think those three are probably like, you read those three, you'll have a pretty good understanding of sort of what screenwriting, gurus are saying about screenwriting.
Okay.
I think reading scripts, read those books, but it's like, I think everybody, no matter where you stand on the issue of screenwriting books, I think everybody who is a screenwriter would definitely say that the most important thing you can do as a screenwriter is actually open up Final Draft, open up, Word, making it is actually write. That's like probably 90% of your time. And then like, let's say, 8% of your time should be reading other screenplays. So like 90% actually writing, 8% reading other screenplays, and then 2% of your time reading how-to screenwriting books. I would say that's kind of the division. But as I said, something like Blake Snyder Save the Cat, it's only going to take you 6 hours. So I don't see a big downside to reading it. But the most important thing is to actually be writing.
Right.
And don't let reading how-to screenwriting books, it becomes just a way of putting off the hard work of actually writing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I found when I've written a few screenplays, and I actually found the books to be better after you started writing. So I would write a really bad screenplay, and then I'd go back and like start reading the books and be like, oh, okay, well, that's what I was doing wrong, and like figure it out like after you've already made the mistakes.
Exactly, because it gives you context, and it will make you sort of really appreciate what they're saying. So I totally agree. You got to get in there and actually start writing screenplays, and then, in your free time, read some of these screenwriting books. I definitely think it's worth reading screenplays. I definitely think that's another mandatory part. 90% write screenplays, 8% or maybe even 9% read other screenplays. You definitely want to read other screenplays because that is a lesson in and of itself, and it's important to understand sort of just the mechanics of screenwriting.
Now, in terms of selling your screenplay, just going back to that theme for a second, do you pay attention to like the trades and do you keep up to date with the trends, and are there any online resources that you use regularly to kind of see what the trend of the markets, like, seeing what's going on at the American film market or what's going on like Hollywood Reporter or things like that?
I should probably do more of that, but I don't really, I certainly keep up with, one of the YouTube channels I subscribe to is like called Movie Trailers. And so I'm constantly watching movie trailers, which is, independent films, studio films. I just enjoy doing that. So, when I'm lying in bed at night or something, I'll just flip on that and I'll watch, a bunch of movie trailer. So that's that. But I would say one big source is Inktip has a weekly newsletter that I subscribe to. And I find it's very interesting because the newsletter is from producers and they're looking for very, very specific things. And so I find that, I do still look at Craigslist ads. Sometimes there'll be producers on Craigslist looking for material. My first script, Dish Dogs, I mean, I sold it basically through a classified ad in the back of Hollywood Reporter back in the late 90s. So, I definitely try and just talk to producers. As I said, this Inktip newsletter is very good. I can't remember how much it is. I think it's maybe $30 or $60 every 6 months or something. But even if you don't have if you're not submitting a lot of scripts to it, it can really educate you on what actual real producers are looking to produce. And I think it will surprise a lot of people. I mean, there's some like really specific stuff. We need, a thriller script for a 25-year-old female actress. It needs to take place in a remote cabin. We have the farmhouse location. So it's like, I mean, there'll be some really specific stuff. What I'm seeing there is there's a lot of producers looking for stuff that has like a cross ties between China and the U.S., something that's not like anti-Chinese so that it will pass government censorship. But there seems to be a lot of money right now in China to produce movies. And so people want material that can kind of, maybe it's about Chinese people in America, so it could play well in China, or maybe it's about Americans in China, but there has to be some sort of crossover ties in order to get this Chinese money. So there's things like that you just pick up on by reading this Inktip newsletter and talking to producers. I mean, just, literally talking to the producers who you have contact with.
And this trend towards China, is it just because it's such a gigantic market? I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff that's like they changed parts of Iron Man or something because of the Chinese market or something.
You'd have to ask a producer. I just know that there's, from a money standpoint, there seems to be money coming out of China to fund movies. They seem to have some sort of a market in China so that there's like a business model there. Or if there's not a business model, they haven't figured out that there's not a business model. So there's still some money. So I don't know. I think that's really, it's an emerging market. I mean, China is growing in leaps and bounds. There's the middle class is growing in China. So I think that there's more people who are watching movies. And I think that trend will continue at least for the next few years.
Now, I have one more thing, and then I'll let you go.
Sure.
I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about the services you offer on your website. And something about that. Yeah,
sure. So, I mean, the blog, I mean, is sellingyourscreenplay.com. And the main thing that I'm doing now on the blog is a podcast. And I guess that's how you found me. And so you just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com, and once a week I publish a podcast, and it's typically with kind of an independent, writer, director, and I just talk about their films that they've done, how they broke into the business. And I will have other people on there. I mean, I had the guy from Inktip, as I mentioned. I had Franken Leonard from The Blacklist on the podcast. So, anything that's kind of, it's called sellingyourscreenplay.com. So I try and really keep it focused on, how to sell your script. I have a free newsletter, and I basically wrote up 5 lessons. And a lot of it is, it's more detailed, but a lot of it is what we talked about today: how to write a logline, how to write a query letter. So I have an email list. If you join the email list, I basically send you these emails. There's 5 lessons, and it's literally 5 lessons how to sell a screenplay. And I go through all the 5 pieces, some of which we covered here. And that's just sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Again, that's totally free. You just get on my email list, and then I send you these 5 lessons over the course of 5 weeks. So it's like I called it Sell a Screenplay in 5 weeks. And then I have Selling Your Screenplay Select, and by joining that, that's basically a monthly subscription fee. And by joining that, you get access to the classes. I just mentioned like Shawshank Redemption and Natural Born Killers. The reason I've read those recently, or one of the reasons anyways, is because I'm teaching these classes and I'm using those scripts to teach classes. And my next class coming up is How to Write a Killer First Act. And I'm basically going through the entire process, outlining your script, coming up with a marketable concept, outlining your script, the first few pages, the first act, the second act, the third act, and then marketing the script. So that's kind of a series of classes. If you join SYS Select, you have access to all those classes. I record the classes, so no matter when you're listening to this in the future, if you want to join, that's great, and you can actually go back and listen to all these classes because I've recorded them. And then if you join SYS Select 2, I also have a forum which you can post your logline and your query letter, and I will personally critique your logline and query letter and give you notes on that. And most of the people who do that also are start doing it, and then they will purchase my email and fax blast service. And I have an email and fax blast service to agents and managers, and then one to producers. And that's basically what I've been doing, and I've had success. I mean, I've optioned 4 or 5 things over the last 12 or 18 months. I sold one script outright, and I did get one nice paid writing assignment. And that was all through really just cold query letters using this email and fax blast service, which you can get into by joining SYS Select.
So you have an agent blast as well?
I do. I have an agents and managers blast. I mean, truthfully, I don't really recommend that to people. Okay. Well, it's and maybe part of it's just my personal experience. My producers list is much bigger. It's like pushing close to 5,000 contacts. My agent and managers list is only like about 500. So if you just do the math on that, it's your odds are not as good. So it's like with the agents and managers blast, if you have a really solid logline and query letter, you might get 4 or 5 people to respond and request the script. But, my producers list is about 10 times the size. So just do the math on that. If you have a really good logline and query letter, I mean, you'll get 10, 20, 30. I mean, I have people who have gotten 40 and 50 script requests from that. So it's just, it's a little bit more economical. I mean, on my end, it's the same amount of work to send a blast to one list or the other. So the price is not that much different, but the results are much different. I also find newer writers, they're a little unrealistic with what getting an agent means. And most of the agents who are going to respond to a cold query letter, they're struggling agents themselves. So even if you are able to land one of these agents, it's probably not going to do nearly as much for your career as you may hope that it will do. I mean, the really high-end agents, they're not responding to cold query letters. So, I would say just keep that in mind. It's worth doing. I mean, why not? I mean, it's if you can get a good agent, that's great. And that can actually help you with the producer's blast, because a lot of times the producer's blast, they'll say, well, please submit through your agent. So then if you have an agent, and it's good fodder for your query letter. If you have an agent at a reputable agency, then you can put that in your query letter when you're blasting to the producer's list as well. It gives you a little bit more credibility. But the producer's blast is what I've had the most success with, as I said, over the last 12 or 18 months. So that's really what I recommend.
Do you offer like a reading service as well when you,
I don't personally do. A lot of people are asking for that. So I have a few writers that I work with, one producer and a couple of writers who I think are excellent, and they will read your script for a fee. And that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultant. So you're free to check that out. The one producer is actually a producer, Mark Heidelberger. He actually produced a couple of the films that I've written. So he's an excellent producer, and he helped me a lot as a developing writer years ago. He was my manager for many years. And then I also have 2 other writers who both have credentials. I mean, they're like actual real writers, not just script consultants. They have actual produced credits. So if you're looking for someone who's like an actual working professional, I definitely recommend check that out too, sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants.
And when just one more question, when you've sold a screenplay, at what point? I mean, a lot of people are trying to build up their portfolio, and they want to have obviously their screenplays up on Imdb. Is there a point in the process when you sell a screenplay, or if it's optioned or whatever, when you start having? How do you get your screenplay listed on Imdb?
It's a good question, and I'm not entirely sure about that. I mean, as the writer, that's not really ever something that I've done. It's always the producers. I think it's always the producers who get that listing. I've actually never submitted an actual project. So I'm honestly not sure. My understanding is it's not that hard. I mean, Imdb is basically like a, user-generated, user-edited platform. So I think there must just be some sort of a submission form where you submit your project, and then I think there's maybe some approval process. I don't know. I've heard over the years it gets harder to get something on Imdb, and then seems to get easier. So I don't really have a good answer for you because I've never really done that.
Well, that's all I have. Do you have anything else you'd like to mention?
No. I mean, I think that covered a lot of stuff, and it's actually a lot of stuff I don't cover in my own podcast. So I'm glad to talk about some of this stuff and sort of the nuts and bolts of the optioning and my writing process. So no, it was interesting just to get that out there, and hopefully people get something out of it. I hope they can learn something from it and maybe incorporate it into their own process.
Oh yeah. Well, I've definitely gotten a lot out of it. And I appreciate it, Ashley.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. Well, this was good. I appreciate it too.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode of the Indie Film Academy podcast. Thanks again to Ashley Scott Meyers of sellingyourscreenplay.com. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode. I'm not sure who our guest is going to be. I just talked with Emily Best of Seed and Spark and Luke Newman of Newman Films. And I've got a bunch of really great interviews coming up. People, all different kinds of walks of life, people who know different aspects of the filmmaking industry. And I've really enjoyed creating this podcast. I hope you guys are getting something out of it too. Feel free to leave me feedback if you think I'm amazing, if you're enjoying it. If you don't like it, that's okay too. Let me know. I'm not a professional broadcaster. I know it's hard to believe that and all. Thanks again to everybody. I just want to talk really quickly about a project I'm working on right now. And what I want to try to do is share that with you guys and share insights about things that you can do every day just to develop yourself as a writer or a director, editor, whatever. One of the greatest things that I've seen lately are these 48-hour challenges or one-day challenges or whatever, where you just have to go out and shoot something. It doesn't matter if everything's perfect, but you've got 24 hours to create a little short film. Now, there's a lot of different places online that you can find those, but what I've done is I've just kind of created one for myself where I'm going to go out and shoot an entire short film in 2 afternoons. And it's 2 afternoons just because the logistics of it are require me to find a few things that won't work on the day when I'm shooting inside the location. But the screenplay is basically 2 characters. One of the characters doesn't even talk, and they're sitting in a room, and it's kind of like a post-apocalyptic world where there's a virus and everything, and a lot of it's left to your imagination, but we'll see how it goes. I'm writing the screenplay right now. I've got like a lot of things, a lot of scenes in my head, and I'm just kind of putting it together. One of the things I'm doing to prepare for that and to prepare for a blog post that I'm working on talking about shooting in one location is watching a lot of movies that have shot in one location, like 12 Angry Men, Telephone Booth, Cube. I just watched Barry the other day, and that is probably one of the greatest things you can do to practice as a screenwriter is to create screenplays that are limited character. Saw is another one, limited characters and one location. And if you can get accustomed to writing with limitations like that, you're going to be able to explode and get, sell screenplays right and left, because that's exactly the kind of thing that producers are looking for. They want to have screenplays that they can actually make that aren't going to cost so much. And the less you have to worry about different locations and more actors and whatever, the more you can put into, lighting the scene and doing really high production value on one set. A perfect example of this is Cube. If you watch Cube, I'm pretty sure I haven't watched any behind the scenes documentaries, but the whole screenplay is around, based around these pretty amazing rooms with all kinds of like designs and everything. And I assume they only built one. Maybe they built, 2 beside each other or whatever. But that the genius of that, that they can create these cubes and just change the color and build this world of like one cube after another, after another, after another. If you can create something ingenious like that and put it into a screenplay, go for it. The thing that I see all the time is people writing screenplays for, $5 million films and, the next Avengers or something like that. And frankly, nobody's ever going to buy that, It'd be very rare. I mean, I never say never, but, if you can focus on a screenplay for a movie that's between, even $50,000 and $500,000, shoot for that. And if you're a first-time screenwriter, shoot for, right around $100,000, That's my personal opinion. And try to create something that's only going to be in one location, and you're gold. All right, guys. Thanks. That's all for me today. Oh, what? Oh, really? Oh, thank you so much. That's me clapping in a room to myself. All right, guys. We'll see you next Tuesday with another episode. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Academy podcast. Don't forget to join our newsletter for more tips and tricks on how to make and market your film online. Go to www.indiefilmacademy.com.